Welcome back to How to Tickle Yourself. I'm your host, Duff McDonald. My co-host, Joey of Rockledge, is on vacation this week. Today's guest is a man who had one of my best ideas long before I did. What do I mean by that? In 2020, I turned to Joey, my wife, and told her that I wanted to start a newsletter called the Kombucha Times. Alas, someone already had that idea. His name is Ian Griffin, and he is the founder and publisher of Booch News, the premier source for independent news and statistics about the kombucha industry, which, as we all know, is one of the most important industries in the world. My main motivation was to get some free kombucha. I'm not sure what Ian's was, but we'll let him tell you about that in a second. A former marketer and speechwriter who was blogging and podcasting when both were still new things, Griffin wrote a blog about professional speaking for over a decade. And at some point after he retired, he was on a trip with his wife to his native UK, couldn't find enough kombucha. Seeing an opportunity to mix his two loves, blogging and kombucha, he landed on the idea of a couple of reports about the industry, and Booch News was born. So this interview is going to be a bit of a mashup. We're going to talk to Ian about all things kombucha, but also about speechwriting, blogging, and podcasting. He thinks AI, for example, has changed the speechwriting game forever. But let's talk about kombucha first. Ian, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks a lot, Duff. It's wonderful to be here.
At the present moment, traveling town to town, the mystery of the motion, right here, right now, right here, right now, whoa, right here, right now.
So, like I said, late to the game, I was sitting there a couple years ago saying to my wife, what would be great is if someone covered the kombucha industry. Meanwhile, you'd already been doing it for years. Tell us your kombucha story. To me, all things kombucha are fascinating. So I would love to hear how you discovered it, became obsessed with it, to the point where you are the editor of the industry's premier source of news.
Yeah, well, it began as many, I think almost every commercial company, I've spoken to a lot of them now, and everybody talks about they began by homebrewing, as I believe you do, and I've done for 12 years. In my case, I gave up alcohol about 12, 13 years ago, and I have to tell everybody I didn't have a problem with it. I'm not in AA. I can't tell you to the day how long I've been sober. I just used to do annual fasts and give up caffeine, alcohol, sugar. And 12, 13 years ago, I came out of a fast and just never had the taste for alcohol. And I quickly got sick or fed up of Calistoga water, Perrier, and pineapple juice. And I discovered in the health food shop, GT's Ginger Ale, which is the gateway kombucha I think a lot of people start with. And I just took to it. My first sip, I was like, whoa, this is great. I love the taste. I didn't have that, I can't get used to it. It's too sour. I liked it from the get-go. And after a month or two, I realized I was buying a case a week, spending $120 a month on kombucha, and went to your friend of mine, Hannah Crumb's kombucha camp online, where you can buy SCOBY and the continuous brew vessel and the various bits and things you need, like heating pads, and started brewing and quickly just never gave it up. I've talked to people who said, I used to brew kombucha and then I got out of it. But for me, I do 3 to 4 gallons a time. I'm the only one in the house who drinks it. My wife's more of a white wine drinker and likes her Jun, which is honey and kombucha.
For shame. Oh, actually, Jun's good. We made Jun for a while.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, but I've not made it consistently. But in my case, the love of kombucha never went away. And then, as you said, about 5 years ago, I retired after a career in Silicon Valley. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and went back to England for a whole month. I had, a longer time, unlike 10-day vacations, which I'd gone to visit family frequently in the past. And during that month, I realized there's hardly any kombucha in Britain at the time. It was hard to find. I did find a few bottles in health food stores. And I thought, well, as you said, I was into blogging and podcasting 12 years before that, 15 years before that in the tech world. So I knew how WordPress worked. I knew how to get a URL. And as I realized more so after I'd done it for one or two posts, I thought I might just write about my adventures in Britain, trying to find kombucha, which were the earliest postings. I realized there's no industry publication about kombucha, which is, depending on the estimates, but it's north of $1 billion, maybe $2 or $3 billion global industry. Unlike, the craft beer business has Craft Beer Association in the US and a nice publication. Any other industry, trucking, nursing today, modern trucker, whatever, there's somebody covering it. And by default, I'm it, even though I do it purely as a hobby. I don't run ads. I don't ask people to pay for reviews or anything. I just do it because I'm fascinated by the industry. I like talking to people like you and like the commercial brewers in this world. There's a vast variety of people with different backgrounds involved. And I guess it's small enough that one-man show, and maybe at some point in the future, Rupert Murdoch's going to launch some mega magazine covering it. But until then, and they make me an offer I can't refuse, I'll continue to publish it.
But wait, let me get this straight. We've talked a couple times. I don't think I ever really got this point. You make no money from Booch News?
No. I mean, I think in the 5 years, I maybe had 3 to 5 free samples sent to me. No. I mean, I blogged for 15 years about public speaking and speechwriting, and that was a free service, if you like. I gave information that was very useful to some professional speakers who made 6-figure incomes. But no, I retired. I've got my financially sorted out. I've got my retirement fund, and so I worked for my whole life for the man, so to speak. Worked on Maggie's farm, as Bob Dylan said, and now I'm ready to just do my own. And I enjoy it. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't be doing it. We were talking earlier. I've just come back from a trip through Greece and Turkey, and last year I was in Portugal, Spain, and France. My brother-in-law has a sailboat which visits nice places, and I always make it a point to try and make appointments. So I visited 2 different groups of people in Greece and one so far in Turkey who brew kombucha, and it's a great way to kind of travel the world and meet interesting people. Most of the time, though, I'm at home on like you are in your studio there with your podcast. I'm at home on my computer blogging or recording people for podcasts.
All right. So are you allowed to say this? Who's your favorite? What's your favorite commercial brand and flavor currently?
Well, people have asked me that. And as a home brewer, I have to say my own home brew. And I think if you brew your own at home, and certainly in my case, I've made terrible brews. I've had it taste like vinegar, but I still drink it down. And usually I haven't thrown too much away.
I've got one here that's gone opaque on me. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, sometimes I'll dilute it with fruit juice or sweet tea to make it palatable. But over the years, I think I've got, I kind of draw the analogy with the beer drinking. I mean, all of us began drinking in England. You've been drinking when you're like 14 or 15. The pubs will serve you. And you don't start by drinking a draft Guinness. You start with a light beer, a lager, or a shandy, as they call them in England, where you mix it with soda. And I find much commercial kombucha is that light because it has to appeal to a mass market. That said, there are 2 or 3 brands. I mean, GTs, I still like to buy a bottle of GTs. It's fermented. It's not pasteurized. He does a good job. He produces millions of bottles a week, I'm sure. And for some weird reason, they're flavored. They don't use sugar. They use, what do they call the little fruits? Drawing a blank. Anyway, they're fruit flavored or fruit sweetened. But, there's 2 or 3 brands. There's one locally I've profiled recently, Marin Kombucha in the Bay Area, in Marin County, north of San Francisco. I really like, they have a lightish but very piquant flavor. I like what they call the originals, which is the unflavored. Many brands do an original, which means they don't add pineapple or ginger or anything to it.
We call that the mother here. We call that the mother flavor.
Yeah. Well, if I'm looking, and in fact, as a tip, anybody who's thinking of homebrewing, you can actually start a homebrew if you buy a bottle of original, leave it to go sour on the counter make sure you loosen the lid so it doesn't explode. And after a couple of weeks, you can probably dilute that 10-1 with tea and get started, get brewing.
All right. So in your kombucha adventures, you have come across factoids that to me are fascinating. So I don't know to the listeners, but I'm the one talking here. So we're going to go with what I want to hear. What is the most popular flavor of kombucha in the world?
Definitely gingerade or ginger flavored. Yeah.
By a big margin?
I'd say it's, I don't have a statistic, but it's a good flavor to add to kombucha. It in my own homebrew, it covers up a multitude of sins. If the kombucha is a little sour, ginger offsets that. Yeah. And it just seems to go, like a nice piece of cheese and an apple pie or whatever. It just goes together, ginger and kombucha. And then, there are other fruitish. Well, I've actually had the honor of sitting on the panel, KBI, Kombucha Brewers International, have a kombucha cup at their conference when we taste about 50 flavors over the course of 2 days and award gold, silver, bronze, as a committee group of about 7 of us decide. And there's floral flavored, there's the herbal flavored, there's, different categories. There's Jun, as we talked about. But I think almost all brands produce a ginger or ginger and something flavor.
We made a coffee kombucha here a couple months ago, which was a bit of a revelation. It's a weird one. That's a bit harder for the non-kombucha drinker to approach, but it was definitely coffee and it was definitely kombucha. But the two of them meeting is like this sort of weird, glorious wedding. What is your favorite? What's your favorite off the wall flavor?
Well, again, going to my own, I growing up in England, this is not my favorite, but it's an off the wall flavor. There was a beverage when I was growing up. I think it's kind of like sarsaparilla in the US. It was called dandelion and burdock. And it was a soda, not an alternative to Coke or Pepsi. And I did get some dandelion and burdock dried roots. I would say it didn't taste that good. So that was off the wall. I like, I do like rosehip. I generally will buy commercial kombucha just to taste it when I'm out and about. And there's a very wide range of creative flavor. There's a nice one. GT's and a few other brands do one made with blue-green algae, and it's bright blue in the bottle.
I've never seen that. I should try that.
It's like a spirulina, but it's blue.
And last I checked with your stats, the U.S. was had the most kombucha by population density, or kombucha brands by population density. Where else? For me, I just think this must be popular all over the world. Is it popular all over the world?
Definitely not yet. As I say, I just got back from Greece and Turkey, and it's almost impossible to find. Even though the woman and her mother, who have a very successful kombucha business in Istanbul, Kombucha 2200, sell 35,000 bottles a month, but that's a population of 80 million, and so it's not popular all over the world. It's interesting you said that the US. I've got these statistics on on Booch News. You can go back to the end of every year or the beginning of January. And for the last 4 years or so, I've done statistical analysis because I keep a list called Worldwide Directory of all of the brands. I try and find them on social media. The US has the most brewers. It's a 300 million population. Actually, New Zealand seems to have the highest per capita. But the thing about this is, there's 2 or 3 brands in the US, Hum, GTs, and Health Aid, who probably account for 70% of the market. And then you've got all the ma and pa operations. And so the fact in the US we've got over 700 breweries doesn't mean they're not equal sized. And nobody, because most kombucha, except for the hard kombucha, which is sold with alcohol above like ABV 7 or 8%, nobody needs to report. There's an organization called the TTB where you have to report tax purposes any alcohol sales. But for a soft drink, for a non-alcoholic drink, 0.5 is the limit in the US. Nobody needs to report the volume of sales. So we don't know how much is being sold. There's some people there's an organization called Spins who try and count the number of boxes they see on the shelves at Costco and so on. But US has the most brewers. The next most popular in terms of absolute number of brewers is surprising me is Brazil. And Brazil has, I think, 500, no national brands, but an awful lot of, it's a big country. I've never been there, but it's very spread out. And there's all these regions, like we have the 50 states, they have 50 plus large regions up in the Amazon and on the coast. And their 500 brewers are the second largest number. The UK has about 100 in the top 10, I'd say. Canada would be next, maybe. I don't have the numbers in front of me. But then you go to Turkey, Greece, France, which is a popular, or even Germany has, 20, 25 kombucha brands so far.
Wow. Okay. I used to love GTs. It was my gateway, like you said. I ended up just sort of weaning from it. It felt like too much in most of their flavors. Kavita, I like a lot. Health Aid, yes, various flavors. Their Pink Lady is great. Hum's is a horrible. It's a horrible tasting kombucha. It's amazing to me that they're in Target or wherever they are, that was the one brand that got a kind of distribution that some other ones doesn't. But, it's one man's opinion. All right. So before we shift gears here, you and I talked recently about, because you had a post on it just before we last talked, some of these ridiculous extensions of kombucha into cosmetics. But even a dietary supplement seems kind of preposterous to me. If you render kombucha into a dry powder, you've kind of killed the kombucha. Is there in it, from where you sit, is this just American branding doing what it always does and going crazy?
Yeah, I mean, much of it is in the cosmetic industry with face creams and other things that you could put on your body, lipstick or whatever maybe. But also supplements, like you say, or powdered kombucha or kombucha in a tablet form. And it's obviously it has no relationship to a liquid beverage. It's like buying a bottle of tablets that say Coca-Cola tablets, not cocaine, but Coca-Cola tablets. And you wouldn't, or beer tablets. I mean, nobody would take a beer tablet and think it's going to be as tasty as a proper IPA or something. And so I think, it's just it's sort of kombucha in the US and UK, maybe other countries, Australia's got a big kombucha culture, is known by certainly the target market for some of those expensive cosmetics, so the young yoga practitioner, vegan kind of woman, say in her 20s or early 30s, would be maybe the marketers have figured out if they put kombucha on the label of a cosmetic, it'll somehow people think it's, you're
Magic.
doing goodness to your skin, but it
Right.
wouldn't. I mean, I'm not a scientist. Maybe there's some skin absorption that goes on, but no, it is definitely. I called my post the outer limits. It's on my blog, and I just keep a running list in the comments. I'm up to like 30 different products, and there's many more that you can find around. There's a kombucha breakfast cereal, I think, where they probably soaked it in, and who knows if they even have any kombucha in them, because I don't think whatever the Trade Descriptions Act or whatever the legal requirements are, obviously they're they're not being sued for calling something kombucha. But as a savvy consumer, I don't think you'd be fooled by those products.
Okay, last kombucha question. Do you like Hannah Crum? And I agree with Hannah Crum. Thinks of kombucha as not just another drink, but as something a little magical, right? With all sorts of powers that extend beyond whatever the flavor you're drinking, and some of them have to do with community. Some of them have to do with getting your body back in balance, etc. Do you think, you're doing something here for free, right? You're editing Booch News. You make it yourself. You obviously have a deep connection to it too. Setting aside the fact that we're talking about a fermented tea made from a SCOBY with flavors, what do you think kombucha actually represents? What is it? Why is it? Why does it get some of us and grab us by the collar and never let us go? What is it about it?
Well, on a very simple level, it is a good tasting beverage, alternative to the alcohol. And it's a nice, I mean, some people drink it as an elixir during the day. Others, like me, I pretty much only drink it with a meal, and it goes down very nicely. But you're asking a question on the larger, almost philosophical level that Hannah Crum, the president of Kombucha Brewers International and has her own business, is known to wax eloquently about the sort of giant SCOBY, that we're all part of, the symbiotic culture. SCOBY stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, and that we share. And I relate to that, especially looking at, if I had to say what Booch News tries to do, when I started it, I thought for a while, well, maybe I'll do kind of a wine spectator blog where I talk about different brands, and this, I will award this one a 90 and that one a 79. But as I said earlier, my taste buds are kind of blown by my own taste. So I look at it through an industry perspective, to the extent I can. And I think as an industry, it does offer a route for individuals to start brewing at home, sell in a farmer's market, become financially independent if they wish. It's also, I think, an industry that when it works well, and I've spoken to a number of people who openly share, not everything that they do, but it's got a sort of a communal sharing aspect that maybe crypto coin or something doesn't. If you're running a crypto company, you probably don't. Or the analogy I use is if you and I lived in the same town and you were a plumber and I was a plumber, I'm not going to tell you, oh, this is what I'm doing to market my plumbing business. This is where I get my supplies. This is where I'm hiring, because you'll steal my ideas. With kombucha, I think even brands that are closely together, close by each other geographically, can still share information. I mean, I'm honored to have visited in person a number. I mentioned Marin Kombucha. There's Better Booch in Los Angeles I visited recently. One in Turkey showed me around her facility. And, there's no mystery. It's stainless steel tanks in the larger sizes, like in a beer brewery, craft brewery. And then beyond that, I think my wife sometimes looks at me quizzically because in my home, I use the corner of the garage to brew kombucha, and I play 528 megahertz music 24 hours a day on a loop to my SCOBYs. And I invested in a $2,000 German structured water filter, which puts the water through a gold faucet. And I did it because the people I met in Germany the year before were adamant that it creates a better tasting kombucha. But it does lend itself to the people who believe that there's something mysterious about this beverage that you can influence with, positive energy. I've met Reiki healers. There was one in Puerto Vallarta who do Reiki healing on their kombucha. And you can be skeptical about that and say, well, it's all woo-woo. But I think there is an element of a sort of so it goes from it's a good tasting beverage, industry-wide. It lends itself to people sharing information, to who knows if it's going to save humanity or heal the planet. Although I will say, there is research out there. The SCOBY, the pellicule that's produced when you ferment kombucha, has a number of interesting industrial properties. They're using them as water filters. People are looking into making clothing that's recyclable and renewable. So it's got a lot of different angles, different potential.
To your point about sharing, we're making our current SCOBYs, which are just behind me in the other room here. We got from Adam Benziger at Laughing Gut. Which is a really great New York based. He's in Poughkeepsie, kombucha, and we went down to visit him, and he gave me some SCOBYs. So, like you said, in a different kind of industry, people aren't giving out just to anyone who walks in through the door, essentially the ingredients of their it's one of those things you got to take care and there's all sorts of decisions you make along the way of brewing kombucha. But the fact that he just gave it to us was kind of mind blowing to me, to your very point.
Yeah. And if you look into the origins, before GT Dave made it a commercial product, it was well known. It was sort of one of those archetypal things that Grateful Dead fans or the hippies in the 60s living in the woods in Oregon would have kombucha on the, like they made sourdough bread and they ferment kombucha. It's been around for thousands of years if you look at the history, and certainly it's always been something that people would share a SCOBY with. It would be the good karma thing to do. And commercial companies, many of them sell homebrew kits and whole classes and freely show people how they do it at scale versus, and how you can do it yourself with 2 gallons on the kitchen counter.
That's awesome. All right, so let's shift gears here. Speechwriting. You sent me 3 lengthy posts you've written recently on how you think AI has changed the speechwriting game, and I was looking at one which is your one on wedding speeches, and it was really fun because you were like, write this wedding speech as if Shakespeare had written it. Write this wedding speech as if Jerry Seinfeld had written it. So as a blogger on speechwriting, give me the take. You're obviously pretty blown away by even these early rudimentary AI tools that we have at our disposal.
Yeah, so we are switching gears. My speechwriting blog called Professionally Speaking was launched when I was at Sun Microsystems, or just after I left Sun Microsystems in 2004, so 20 years. And I did put a note on it when I started Booch News saying, I'm moving on. I'm now doing kombucha, go to my new blog, but I still update the Professionally Speaking blog when something strikes me like AI. And I clearly remember, as I said, I spent my career in the tech industry, and I worked for Sun Microsystems for 15 years. And I clearly remember being at my desk when I first clicked on the Netscape browser. And, that was the first time you could sort of see, moving images on a web page, and a web page was a new thing. It wasn't the command line that we're used to typing on the computers in those days. And to me, when I first came across, my daughter, actually, her boyfriend sent a picture on a chat group of my daughter, Emily, who's in tech as well, trying to figure out whether she could use ChatGPT to write an employee letter. And I'd never heard of it. And I thought, what is she doing? This was back in just after it had been released, I think last October, November. And I kind of tried it a little bit. It's very simple to start using ChatGPT, but you've got to register. And when I tried it, immediately the same light bulb went off in my head as when I saw the browser. And since then, I've basically played around with it, although I did give an hour presentation at the Kombucha conference on marketing kombucha with using AI, generative AI, because AI, I like to say, has been around
since
you first used it.
Wait. The marketing using AI, or your hour-long thing was done using AI, or both?
No, my presentation was on how a kombucha brand could use AI to help with their marketing.
Okay.
Which would be writing, maybe writing a blog post or coming up with content for their blog or images that they could use. In fact, there's a kombucha company in Colorado who developed their logo using Midjourney, which is an AI.
Oh, my brother is an artist. He uses Midjourney extensively.
Well, that's good because, so the thing I'd say about AI, which wasn't the case with the browser, as I was aware, was there's definitely a pushback. Some people, artists, are saying, "Oh, we'd never use AI because it's not human. It's a machine. It just steals stuff. It's taking images and likewise with ChatGPT, which is all the text, whether it's Shakespeare sonnets or letters about the best man's speech at a wedding. It does learn. It's what's called a large language model." So we can get pretty technical here, but it's basically sucked in everything it could find on the internet. And then through some magic, there's a famous science fiction writer called Arthur C. Clarke who said years ago that great technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I think that's certainly the case with AI. To a certain extent, it was true of the internet as a whole. Nobody really knows how Google works. When you Google something and it comes back with pages of websites, so how is it finding those? Well, Google can tell you, but it won't tell you for real because that's its secret source. But with AI, I found it was a liberating, new horizon that as a speechwriter. So the reason I did those posts on speechwriting, that was my job. I was at Sun for 15 years. During those 15 years, I had 6 different jobs, starting out in tech support, going through product training, and ending up for 3 years as the speechwriter for the senior executives. And then I moved into Hewlett-Packard and Cisco. Now, when I say speechwriting, it was executive communications. So you were often writing, most of it was PowerPoint slides that you'd pull together with speaker notes, not the other side of speechwriting. I did 3 posts. One was on the wedding speech. The other was on corporate speech writing with PowerPoint and so on. And then the third was on political speech writing, which is, the West Wing. That's how maybe the public would think of a pure play speechwriter. And in all 3 cases, I think AI can, a lot of speech writing isn't just like, sitting there waiting for inspiration to strike, like you're writing a T.S. Eliot poem or something. It's research. And it's a lot of hard work is around digging out the facts, double checking the facts. And AI can get the facts wrong. So that's something to state. It's called hallucination, where it gives you misinformation. But you have to bear that in mind. You have to double fact check like any journalist would. And then maybe you're giving a speech to a skeptical audience. So you could ask AI to give me 10 points that critique this point of view. Give me 10 alternative view. And that is all, it's done like in the blink of an eye. That's the other thing.
I have no problem with, I think this whole fear of AI is just that. It's fear, right? And if people are like, oh, who knows if it's a human on the other end of the thing or AI? It's like, well, if you're not paying attention enough to something to know if there's real meaning in the content, right? Like you said, an AI can have a hallucinatory mistake. I think that's on you. It's not I think AI is sort of like you said, it's the promise of the internet. It's all the information, but now not just Googleified. For example, I've only used ChatGPT twice for real. I'll tell you what I did it for. One was my SCOBY was getting too thick, like the babies were stacking up, and I just couldn't find the right answer. What am I supposed to do here? Which one do I keep? So I just asked ChatGPT, and it gave me a great answer. But my more favorite thing, of the 2 that I've done. So I live out here in upstate New York, right? So I have a bunch of gasoline-powered tools. I have a snowblower. I have a lawnmower. I have a chainsaw. I have a weed whacker. There must be another one. Anyway, some of them use gasoline only. Some of them use gasoline and oil mixes.
Hmm.
And for the life of me, I could never remember, do I need 2-cycle oil? Do I need 4-cycle oil? Do I need gas only? Do I need what do I do here? And so essentially every time I'm running out of gas with something, find myself on the internet again because I'm too lazy to commit it to memory. So I asked ChatGPT, I was like, I own a bunch of power tools and I keep getting confused by the gas oil mixes. Talk to me as if you're my mechanic. What do I need to know? And it basically laid them all out in a table for me.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that had bedeviled me for years. It was like, oh, I understand your problem entirely. Here's your answer in a table. To me, I have no problem with anything that can do that for us.
Well, I'm sort of astounded, or I'm, as the English say, gobsmacked a little bit that you, Duff McDonald, who's written, as I can see on the shelf behind you, Tickled, and a bunch of other books and articles for magazines, and content comes out of you every month or whatever, a week in this podcast, has only used it for those two very practical purposes because, you're a content creator. And I think as much as ChatGPT, and by the way, that would be something you want to be careful asking it what gasoline mix, because it might get it wrong and your lawnmower would blow up or something. But it's, to me, the reason I wrote about the speechwriting, which is only one of a number of articles I put on my professionally speaking blog. I'm a big fan of James Joyce's book, Ulysses, which I finally managed to read last fall before I went to Ireland for the winter, for the holidays, and traveled around Dublin looking at the sites that are associated with Ulysses. And I gave ChatGPT and Midjourney some simple prompts. I asked it to write, first of all, summarize Ulysses, which is not an easy book to summarize. And it did make a couple of mistakes. I won't go into all the details, but in chapter 1, it said something that really only happens in episode 2. But I asked it to write haikus about each character. I asked it to write very obscure things. Joyce was kind of analogies were made in Ulysses between the position of Ireland as a imperial subject of Britain prior to independence in Ireland in 1920s, and Hungary in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, because Leopold Bloom's father was from Hungary, and this is all tied in by Joyce. And ChatGPT knew all this. It blew me away when I said, no, I had to ask what's called the prompt. I had to say, what comment would you make about relationship between Austria? How is the role of Hungary portrayed in Ulysses? And so I had to know that was a thing in Ulysses, but it came back. And so as a content creator, what I tried to show in those 3 most recent blog posts for wedding speeches, political speeches, and corporate is you can throw your kind of creativity. It's limited by the sophistication, in a way, of the
questions, right?
Of the question, the prompt. And there's actually a whole world now of what they call prompt engineering, where it really does, and especially the graphical Midjourney, the kind of image it'll return, or what it'll do with an image you give it to then manipulate, is there's a guy I'd recommend called Nick St. Pierre on Twitter. His handle is Nick Floats, and he's a graphic artist, the first order, who spends his whole life showing you how you can get Midjourney to return certain images. If you say, as filmed on Fujifilm, or as filmed on Agfa, or with this focal length, or with that camera lens, or with this lighting, and so on and so on and so on. And it generates, the images side of the world of artificial intelligence.
I got a better one for you. You want to go see @Steve McDonald on Instagram, who's my brother, who's been using it for a couple years, and his showcasing of the capacity of AI and Midjourney for what he's described to me as training. You have to train the software, is unbelievable. And anyone who is crying about this stuff doesn't understand, and Steve and I talked about this too. We have always used tools, right? Those of us who create, whether it's visual or the written word or any sort, everyone always uses tools, right? Nobody is just making something without any outside help at all. It's just the latest tool. It's super powerful. But in the hands of a good artist, right? This is it's changing the game. I take your point about me and writing. I just haven't had an appropriate circumstance to try it out. But I absolutely.
Well,
I don't see why not.
Maybe try and ask it to give you the top 10 points that are made in Tickled, and see if it's except it doesn't know anything after September 2000, 18 months ago. I don't know when your book was published, but
2021. So I might have made it under the wire.
It might have made it, but what you said a second ago. I mean, I mentioned Ulysses. I mean, you can read about James Joyce's life, and from an early age, he was a very intelligent young man in Ireland and lived in the library, and he basically absorbed, Greek philosophy, history, all the way up through, and T.S. Eliot and those writers. Their works are filled with allusions, some very esoteric, to existing literature. Not saying that generative AI would write Ulysses, but it might.
No, but you make a great point. I had a friend who took a course on Finnegan's Wake in college, and he basically spent all his time in the library, like sitting there with the Encyclopedia of Saints and various things, trying to sort out what, as you say, Joyce had sort of sucked in and synthesized into the whole thing. So AI has promises to be able to help us sort it out in a way that we couldn't before. You know what, Ian? We're having too much fun here. We've run on too long. Listeners, Professionally Speaking is Ian's formerly defunct but still alive and kicking blog about professional speaking, where if you want to check out, he's got 3 big posts recently, like he said, on wedding speeches, corporate speaking, and professional speaking, right? And Booch News, which is where you can find out all you need to know about kombucha, which is, as Ian and I agree, one of the greatest developments that's ever hit the earth, maybe even more than AI.
Right.
Right? Let's put things in the right order here. AI can help us figure some stuff out. Kombucha's going to, as Hannah Crum tells us, and we agree with Hannah, or at least I do, it's going to change everything. It changed me, changed my life. Did it change yours?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For the better. I mean, what would I have done in retirement? I don't play golf, and there's a limited amount of television I want to watch. So.
Ian Griffin, thank you for joining us. It's been great.
Thanks, Duff.
So this is odd. It's just me here now after Ian's gone. I'm normally talking to Matt or Joey. So I'll be brief. In the category of I've got one for you. What kombucha totally took over my entire life. It's a little hard to explain how, although not entirely. I have a chapter in Tickled about it. And I also have an upcoming piece on Audible about it, where I talk about that very thing. But, I was thinking earlier today, before I was talking to Ian, there's certain things in life that we just can't explain, right? We live in an age when we want science to explain everything to us. We think science, and we think some expert can explain to us why things are or what things are. And the fact of the matter is, and we overlook this all the time, that there are some things that we just cannot explain, but they're still very much real. And I put them in the realm of the things that must be experienced to be understood. And I was reading this book called The Perfect Relationship by Swami Muktananda recently, and he just had this one phrase that I thought was so great, which gets to the root of some things cannot be explained. And he's talking about an inner state here. This is the ultimate state of yoga, of everything, of self-realization. But it's not really the point. The point is the language that I'm about to read to you. And he said, trying to describe that inner state is, as Narada says in the Bhakti Sutras, which is a book, like a mute person trying to describe taste. So think about that for a second. A mute person trying to describe taste. Some things lie well beyond the realm of rational or the explanatory capacities of reason, like a mute person trying to describe taste. On a similar note, and again, kombucha is magic, by the way, people. You might not like the taste. If that's okay, it's not your thing. But both the drink and also making it, as Hannah Crum would tell you, there's a kind of alchemy that happens that in one way we can try to explain, in another we really can't. And our boy Sri Aurobindo, in his book Essays Divine and Human, was making this point about the limitations of reason, but also the promise of yoga. So I wanted to read that to close out this episode. He said, "The hope that by using our reason and observing or utilizing the laws of nature, we can arrive at a perfect life here is futile. For our nature here, being itself ignorant and imperfect, cannot arrive at anything better than a mitigated imperfection and ignorance. But if there is a means by which we can arrive at a true knowledge of the reality behind things and enter into its truth and light and power, then there is no reason why our life here should not become divine and perfect. It is through yoga that this means can be found and this emergence become possible. You can also find it through kombucha." Thank you for listening. We'll be back with you in a week.
You've been listening to How to Tickle Yourself with your host, Duff McDonald, and me, Joey of Rockledge. You can help us by liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast with others. You can talk to us and see what else is happening on Instagram and Facebook at How to Tickle Yourself. This program was recorded in Studio B of the historic Rockledge Recording Studio. Right Here, Right Now, our original 16-part theme music, was written and recorded by the legendary Paul Reddick and Kyle Ferguson of the Sidemen, with Steve Mariner on bass and drums and in the mixing room. This podcast is produced and distributed by Storic Media. Our editor is Oscar Desiderio. Our producers are Kristen Verbitsky and Chuck Labella. For more information, visit storicmedia.com. That's STORIC media.com.